This emergency response is like no other we have ever seen. Describe the ways you see it as being so markedly different from anything you had to deal with. This is a kind of natural disaster, but a very different one.
Right. This was part of our pandemic planning. And one of the things we had to focus on was the fact that unlike most disasters, which are geographically focused, Superstorm Sandy hitting the New York metropolitan area, Hurricane Katrina hitting New Orleans, and you can move resources from other parts of the country, you can't do that in a pandemic. All 50 states, territories are all being impacted at various degrees at the same time. So unlike other disasters where you can take resources from one part of the country and go somewhere else, there's limited federal capability. And that's why the governors and the states are having to maximize their resources, with the federal government, particularly FEMA, playing a coordination role with federal resources.
How much of FEMA's or the administrator's time, in your experience, how much of FEMA's mind share or bandwidth is devoted to dealing with pandemics like this one, as opposed to dealing with the more common sorts of disasters that we associate FEMA with, which are hurricanes and storms and tornadoes, maybe earthquakes?
Can't speak to the current team, but it was something we were dealing with. I mean, when I got to FEMA in 2009 in May, we were still looking at H1N1, how bad that could be. Fortunately, vaccines had come on board, and then it wasn't as severe. But, when we talk about all hazards, we plan for all hazards. And one of the things I try to get people to focus on at FEMA was there was a lot more that could happen besides hurricanes and earthquakes. We were looking at pandemics, we were looking at cyber, we were looking at geomagnetic storms. And what I was trying to get across to people is we have to look at those types of events that our system is not readily built for and figure out how we're going to adjust, because as the nation's emergency managers, we can't say it's too hard.
Craig, it's Kelly here back at studio. I just have a question about FEMA. Ron Insana weeks ago here had suggested that FEMA would be a better way to handle the response to coronavirus than using the Fed and Congress and so many others. Could a beefed up FEMA in the future be a way of responding in terms of money, getting to people's doors, not having to go through the traditional banking system, you name it, in terms of disaster relief for a pandemic?
I think we still needed the supplemental, but what we could have done, FEMA, and this is what I had talked about before, and what I still believe, is the disaster relief fund has a lot of capability to get money to states quickly. And I think if we had given the states more guidance, had issued the directive that the president did, but made it broader to include states taking action and reimbursing that, as well as turning on programs under a major presidential disaster like disaster unemployment, disaster SNAP or food stamps. There's been some question as to could FEMA declare a major disaster for a pandemic? I know that Senator Collins at one time had put in language, never got passed. But I think in the absence of all else, this was something that could have been done early. It can still be done. And in many cases, you would have needed the supplemental given the magnitude of this. But money could have been flowing and disaster unemployment could have been flowing several weeks ago.
What is it that FEMA, in the current circumstance, does best? What is their most critical role here? What are they uniquely qualified to do in this circumstance?
Providing a focus within the federal government for coordinating all the federal assets. If governors are having to go from agency to agency to figure out who's got what, who can do what, we lose the efficiency. So FEMA, and really it's not just FEMA, it's what we call the National Response Coordination Center. It's made up of the federal family working as one team, that when requests come up from the governors, we can best source, best resource those. But also one of the things that FEMA's having to do is make priority decisions about where stuff will go. There's just not enough stuff to go to everybody on the beginning. So there's also some prioritization that has to take place with experts from CDC and others guiding that. But it does provide governors one stop for coordination of what federal assets are available. And hopefully, as this gets a little bit further down the road and FEMA's able to get more supply chain and other things in place where they got good understanding of what's available, when it will be delivered, and the demands from the states, and start prioritizing not just the most critical hit areas, but also getting ahead of this in states that are seeing these next waves coming.